Candyman is one of my personal favorite horror movies. It was one of those movies I always watched on VHS. So when I saw the Candyman double feature bundle for $10, it was an obvious buy. The bundle came with the 1992 version and the 2021 film by Nia DaCosta and Jordan Peele. Now, I've seen the 2021 version once, and I might do a review on that. But without further ado, let's get to the movie. Directed by Clive Barker, this movie has some of the best music out of the classic horror movie lineup. We start with narration from Candyman, and I must say, these moments are very effective in setting a mood or atmosphere. It's then followed by beats surrounding tall buildings in Chicago, where this movie takes place. Afterwards, we cut to two young people at a house. They go to the bathroom, and the girl explains the legend of Candyman. The legend, of course, being that if you say Candyman 5 times in a mirror, he'll appear behind you and end you with his hook hand. But the guy only says it 4 times, before being dismissed downstairs by the girl, who says it a 5th time, and is slain by Candyman off screen. This whole story is told by a student to Helen, our protagonist, as she records the whole thing and takes notes. Helen then meets her friend Bernadette, who is also interviewing a student. He leaves, and they laugh about how ridiculous the whole thing sounds. While Helen records her findings onto a computer, a janitor overhears the name Candyman and invites her other janitor friend in to explain a story. She heard about the myth. About a lady who heard crashing like someone trying to break through the wall. She called the police, but no one believed her. After calling again, they found her body in the apartment. Cut to Helen explaining to Bernadette her apartment was built as a housing project and matches those in Cabrini Green, Candyman country. But because it wouldn't work, they just sold the lot off as condos. Helen shows her that you can get through the walls via the bathroom mirror, and this is how the criminals thought to be Candyman would get around. Bernadette startles Helen, and they both laugh at the idea of any of this being true, before turning to the mirror to test the myth. Bernadette chickens out at 4, while Helen says it all 5 times. We then get this great shot of the mirror, followed by a shot of Helen asleep in bed, awakened by a sudden noise in the night. She calls to her husband Trevor, but is met with no response. This is where we get our first jump scare. It tricks you into thinking it's Candyman, when really it's just Trevor. In an earlier scene, Heather notices a girl blushing over Trevor. When the girl leaves, Trevor laughs off the idea of cheating as if it is ridiculous. I mention that now because it will come up later in the film. Helen and Bernie are going to Cabrini Green to gather more info and are greeted by gangsters who think they're cops. Helen goes up the stairs and begins taking pictures of the walls and graffiti before being scared by a woman and her dog. They continue to a vacant apartment, said to be the place where the lady Ruthie Jean was found, the woman from the janitor's story earlier. Helen crawls through the bathroom mirror for pictures and stumbles upon this epic mural of the Candyman. The sight of it makes her eyes water, and she finds a bag of razor-rigged candy. While leaving, they're confronted by the woman with the dog, who then hears the baby cry and swiftly returns to him, leaving the door open for Helen and Bernie to enter. After some small talk, Anne-Marie tells them of the horror she heard through the walls the night Ruthie Jean was found. Cut to her dinner at a nice restaurant. Helen hears the story of Candyman for the first time, a story in which a young artist with a rich father would draw portraits for wealthy people. Candyman would then fall in love with the landowner's daughter, impregnating her. The father would then pay a pack of brutal hooligans to exact revenge. They used a rusty blade on his right hand, smothered him in honey so bees would sting him, burned him, then scattered his ashes over Cabrini Green. Helen returns to the mural to take a picture because she ran out of film earlier, then stops by Anne-Marie's where she meets Jake, a kid resident of Cabrini Green. Helen is then led by Jake to the scene of another Candyman victim. Jake tells the story of a young boy who was supposedly attacked while in a public washroom by Candyman. Helen goes in for pictures, but is then intercepted by thugs who hit her with a hook. In the next scene, Helen identifies her attacker, and Jake feels betrayed by Helen because she said it would be their secret if he showed her Candyman. This next scene has Candyman doing exposition, and it sounds great, and is pretty unsettling. He tells Helen that he came for her and to be my victim. All this happens in a parking garage, when suddenly Helen blacks out, waking up in a pool of blood in a bathroom. She walks out to discover a dog head, and a hysterical Anne-Marie, crying over her baby Anthony's empty crib. Helen is then charged and tackled by Anne-Marie, being questioned on the whereabouts of Anthony. Helen defends herself with a cleaver before the cops show up to arrest her. After interrogation, she calls Trevor to bail her out, but is met with no answer. But he does show up later on. People speculate whether the baby is missing or worse. Helen questions Trevor where he was the night before when she called. He just says he was sleeping. Helen is then relaxing, looking through her photos, when she notices a dark figure behind her in a mirror shot. Then, Helen's in the bathroom when suddenly a hook breaks through the mirror. She runs out to the hallway, but is intercepted by Candyman. And when he talks, it sounds like inner monologue or something. It's great. Helen runs to her phone, grabs a knife, but the Candyman puts her to sleep. When the police show up to her apartment, her best friend is slain on the floor. She is hauled away and placed in a mental hospital, where she sees Candyman on her first night. Next, we see Helen brought to a doctor, who reveals she's been there for a month. He plays the footage of Helen seeing Candyman, but only she was able to see him at that time. She then offers to prove he is real by saying his name 5 times in a mirror. He then appears with his hook in the doctor, freeing Helen of her restraints and flying out the window. Helen escapes and returns home to find the student from the beginning painting her walls pink. She gives this awesome crazed look in her eyes a couple times, and you could really see how hurt and betrayed she is, even saying that Trevor is all she had. Helen returns to the Cabrini Green apartments, where she finds Candyman. She stabs him with a hook. She is then made drowsy and carried across the room to be covered in bees. Helen awakes to find the words, "It was always you, Helen," written by an art piece of the landowner's daughter, from the origin story. Helen hears the baby cry and is lured to the bonfire location. Jake wakes up and sees Helen enter, but he only sees her hook. Upon reaching the baby, residents of Cabrini Green begin to set the fire, and Candyman tries but fails to keep Helen in the center of the fire. She escapes, saving Anthony, but unfortunately does not survive herself. Cut to Helen's funeral, where residents of Cabrini Green all have come to pay respects. Jake and Anne-Marie lead, and Jake throws Candyman's hook in with Helen's casket. Now, Trevor is sad over Helen as he realizes how much better she was than his new girl. He says her name 5 times in the mirror, and Helen appears hook ready and takes him out right there. The new girl finds his body and screams, ending the movie.